So improv really at its heart are the skills of listening, uh, active empathy, and practicing that. And so each time you practice improv, you have to practice those skills. And when people see those comedic examples, they think there's no way I could ever do that. In reality, they are doing it all the time. And so the skills of improv come up every day and people are doing it constantly.
You're listening to the Growth Edge Leadership Podcast, where leaders sharpen their edge and elevate their impact. Let's grow together. Well, hello and welcome to another episode of the Growth Edge Leadership Podcast. I am your host, Laurie Baedke, and I am excited to welcome Dr. Michael Smith to the podcast today. Mike is an academic hospitalist, medical educator, and the founder of Healthcare Improv. More than a decade ago, an unexpected gift of improv classes sparked what would become a completely new dimension in his work. Today, he helps healthcare professionals strengthen communication, leadership, and teamwork through the deliberate practice of improv, showing that some of our most important leadership skills aren't learned through lectures, but through experience. So, Mike, it's great to have you on the show. Welcome.
Thanks so much, Laurie. I'm very excited to be here. And I'm always very excited to talk about improv and its relation to every aspect of life.
Awesome. So, Mike, when most people, or also most of your physician colleagues, hear the word improv, they probably picture like a comedy club or a theater, not necessarily leadership development, but you've built an entire movement and a business around using improv to help clinicians and other healthcare professionals to become better communicators. So, I'm just going to ask you maybe the most obvious question right up front. What do most people misunderstand about improv?
Yeah, I think there are lots of different misunderstandings or ways that it can be interpreted. I think some people see, those comedy improv experiences, and like, whose line is it anyway? Or maybe they've been to a show in New York or Chicago. And so improv really at its heart are the skills of listening, active empathy, and practicing that. And so each time you practice improv, you have to practice those skills. And when people see those comedic examples, they think there's no way I could ever do that. In reality, they are doing it all the time. And so the skills of improv come up every day and people are doing it constantly. And so the biggest misunderstanding I would say is that they can't do that, or that they're not creative enough, or that I'm not that type of person. And I think those seeing really high level examples is great, but it can contribute like there's no way I can get there. But in reality, we all do it every day and experience those moments of improv throughout every aspect of our life, especially professionally.
I mean, you mentioned listening and empathy, hugely important. And so much of improv, again, I think about it, and I've known you for a while. You're here in Omaha, just like me. We've sat down for coffee. I love that. I've had a chance to get to know you over the years, but I also think about improv, and I bring a bias or a mindset that it has to be probably something related to comedy or theater. And it's not necessarily for me, but when you say listening and empathy, or being able to think about and respond or adapt on the fly when you get put on a spot in a meeting and you might not know the answer, or, you're an academic hospitalist. So it's early August when we're recording. There's a fresh new batch of trainees that just arrived in the hallways that you're perhaps rounding with. And if that medical student or resident gets put on the spot by an attending with a question and they're stumped, what are the skills that improv equips us or them with that we might not necessarily have thought, oh, that's improv?
Yeah, and so the idea that you respond in the moment or are creative, again, those high level improvisers are coming up with things in the spot, and people say, "Oh, I could never come up with that." What they're really doing is saying yes to what's happening, and then just building off that. The improv kind of recommendation is bring a brick, not a cathedral. And so they're building each scene one by one. And so they're really focusing on being present and how do I respond and add to this? So recognizing what's happening and contributing what you can. And so that new medical student or new resident is thinking, how do I give the perfect 100% right answer? It's got to be perfect. It's got to be exactly what this person's thinking. And the tenets of improv and the skills of improv are, let me recognize what's happening and respond uh, with the best that I can and going from there. And as an academic hospitalist, patients throw loops at me all the time. And where I kind of think I have an idea of how this visit's going to go or how their treatment plan should work. And then they say, oh, yeah, and I've been having chest pain as well. Or, oh, yeah, and I don't have uh, electricity at home. So no matter what I read in a book, I need to be able to respond in that moment. I can't say like, oh no, it's fine, or well, you good luck figuring it out, because that's really not going to connect with the patient and their needs and actually help them. And so, being able to just respond in the moment in an honest and helpful way that really drives that connection. That's kind of the main learning point that I bring with a lot of our events is connection first, communication. And so really trying to connect first rather than show how smart you are. Or in improv, the trying not to be funny. If you try to be funny in an improv show, it really tanks the scene because it comes at the expense of your scene partner. Um, it's disconnected from what's actually happening. It's making you the center of it, as opposed to the improv style, which is how do we build something fun together and find connection with each other, and the audience gets to enjoy that. Similarly, in the hospital, finding connection with a colleague to help a patient, finding connection with a patient's family member to help them. All those are ways that the improv mindset uh, is cultivated, and you get immediate benefit in improv, whereas in real life, you may or may not see the benefit or the harm of doing or not doing it.
It's really amazing. And that to me kind of tells the story that this is not necessarily an individual sport, but it's a team sport because you're taking what someone else has offered and you're trying to, again, bring a brick and then give the ability for someone else to add to it. Is that correct? Tell me a little bit more if I'm connecting those dots accurately. If that's the case, what does that look like in improv or how do you teach around that? And then how has that changed the way that you show up as a physician?
Yeah. So in it, in the improv world, we'll say that's I'm not going to control the scene, and also I have to bring something to the scene. So it's not like I'm showing up empty-handed. It's I'm bringing this little bit, and I'm ready to see what we're going to build together. I uh, I can't count the number of times where I've either witnessed my um, fellow improvisers do that, or I feel like I've been a part of it and looking back on it. It's like, how did we come up with that? Like, that was so funny. And there's no way I could have come up with that on my own. And it creates magic is really the only word, because you're like, I have no idea how this happened. Similarly, you bring that to the hospital and clinic. You may again, you may have an idea of how something should go, but if the patient is not included in building that reality together, it'll either be brushed off or not applicable, or you may be missing large important sections of the story. And so bringing kind of what you're thinking and allow them to tack on to that and build it together from a patient care perspective, that builds much more powerful care plans that they feel invested in. And then from a leadership perspective, I mean, everyone talks about how do you get everyone's involvement in problem solving and bringing everyone to the table. I think the improv mindset really demands that you do that, because you're taking your perspective, you have talents and skills and ideas, and you're bringing them to the table. And everyone else kind of has a similar idea. Let's hear what Mike's idea was, and then I'm going to add on top of that. And so to build momentum from a leadership perspective, I think it's an absolute essential way to kind of build something that you can't come up with just by yourself.
Yeah, you pointed out it's you and your active engagement of the patient and or perhaps their family members or caregivers. But I have to imagine it also invites and then really intentionally involves a multidisciplinary team as well, because when you're rounding on the floor, it's not just you and the patient. There are nurses involved, there are pharmacists involved, there are a host of other individuals involved. Tell me a little bit about what that looks like in the workplace, but then also I'm guessing that's the reality in your workshops when you're working with healthcare organizations as well. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, in the clinical space, that's again huge. That I know what the book says the treatment plan is, but then the physical therapist says they can't walk, so that obviously won't work. And the pharmacist said, well, actually, this drug costs X amount of dollars, and they are already paying this amount. And so it's one of the most essential parts of my job is understanding everyone's perspective, and it's not just my idea; it's how my ideas connect with each of those parts. And so I have to do it. And then in the workshops, that's been one of the biggest benefits for me personally is understanding different professions' perspective. So I started doing workshops in 2018, and they're kind of designed around how improv has helped me as a physician. So I was like, this helps me communicate. This helps me listen. And I'm more empathetic when I'm talking with patients. The people that signed up were from the business office or non-patient facing professions. And so I was like, oh, okay, well, we can still work from this. And that's been one of the best parts about it is because you hear their perspective on these problems and these issues that face all of us. And I'll do exercise with groups of people and they'll have really brilliant insights about how it applies. And then do the exact same exercise with a different group. And it's the thousandth time I've done the exercise and someone always says something new or like, oh man, I've never thought of that. And that is so true. And so it's been an education for me because I get to hear everyone's perspective in these situations that where 5 minutes ago they're laughing hysterically, and then now they're talking about really deep ideas about what it means to be in their profession and practice it and the challenges and very not serious but important conversations. And that dichotomy in each workshop is one of the true blessings of it, I would say.
Love that so much. And as you and I have chatted before, and as I was thinking about our conversation today, one of the framings that, and you can tell me if I'm using that terminology right, but one of the improv framings is yes and, right? I think it's a fairly foundational element of the improv model. So tell us a little bit about what yes and is and how it's used in improv.
Yeah. So that's in improv, we step out on stage. We don't really know what's going to happen. And so we have to have a super structure to kind of guide us. And so, yes, and ends up being one of the more essential principles. And so that's if we come out on stage, you say something, I'm going to say yes to whatever that is, and then add something onto it. And so that's the bare bones, the description of it. But there is a lot of confusion or assumption that when you say something, that means I have to like it. It doesn't mean that I agree with it. It doesn't mean that that's how things are going to go. That means that your character believes that or thinks that, or that's a part of reality. So you could say, we're cowboys and I don't want to be cowboys, but that just means you're a cowboy. It's like, shoot, I wanted to be an astronaut, but I guess we're being cowboys today. And so that is accepting your reality and then building off of that. That is so applicable to all of the communication that I do in healthcare, and that nuance of not agreeing with someone or not saying that that's the right answer. If someone says, I need uh, a month's prescription of opiates, I don't have to be like, well, yes, and don't don't sell these, please. It's more you're saying you're in a lot of pain, and I want to address that pain, and I'm going to do everything I can to help you treat that in the most effective way. And I think in leadership, it's also super important because the adaptability piece to me is saying yes to the reality that you're in. and really understanding it. And again, you don't have to like it. It doesn't have to be what you want or what you anticipated, but that's the reality that you're working in. And the and piece are, what are your principles? How do we add our principles into what's happening in front of us and growing from there, as opposed to being blindly pushing your principles despite it being not applicable to the reality. And so I think in an individual conversation, it hugely adds to empathy, connecting with people that you may or may not otherwise connect with, or that you disagree with even. It still allows for connection. And then in the leadership piece, it's seen as adaptability, but it's really just principled development in whatever area your group hopes to go.
And I like that. And thank you for kind of digging into and exploring or explaining that just a little bit more, because it helps me to realize both how that's applied in the workplace and, again, in a multidisciplinary team. You gave a couple of examples, right? You're prescribing a plan of treatment upon discharge, but then your patient says, yes, I hear you, and I have no power at home, right? And so it's just this constant iterative building. Or you prescribe or recommend a medication, but then the pharmacist says, or the social worker says, yes, and that particular medication is unavailable, or there's not a generic, or it's not covered under the formulary for this particular patient, right? So it's just this constant building. And that is so important and true in an interdisciplinary team care environment. It's also true. One thing that I heard you say that is, several things can be true at the same time. And that is one of the dissonances or the tensions that is so difficult for all of us. It's difficult for us in our day jobs, in, diverse teams. It's difficult for us in our society around us.
Mm-hmm.
When people have beliefs or diverse perspectives from our own, is acknowledging that two things can be true at the same time. And you're just helping me to understand why improv is so incredibly important. But also, I'm glad that you pointed out, because I think that a lot of people might think that yes and does just mean that we have to simply agree with everyone. And that doesn't necessarily have to be the case. You can be space cowboys, right?
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's so I do a workshop at UNMC on the med students' first day of school, which I think is so funny that they're like, I'm ready for med school, here I come, and then they get improv. But within that, they write essays, and so they'll say, how did you use yes and? And then they talk about with a family member that they have been disagreeing with a roommate that they've been disagreeing with. So it's not anything to do with medicine. But they said, I use yes and I didn't change my mind. They didn't change their mind, but they saw me listening to them more. And so they listened to me more. And it felt like we understood each other better. And it was headed towards a real contentious moment where I was going to argue with someone that I love or is important to me. And it turned out that it was actually productive. And and again, no one changed their mind. Nothing materially changed about how they approach the world. But they did take the stress of kind of arguing and seeing division where it would have otherwise existed. Now they're having a moment of connection despite disagreeing, which to me, it's very meaningful to provide that skill at the start of medical school when they have so much stress in their life. If they have a framework for communicating with people that lowers the stress level in other aspects of their life, they can kind of focus on the stresses of medical school. And so that's a very clear example to me of people using this in ways where you're not agreeing with everyone around you, but you're just really seeking to find connection and understanding as a first principle, and going from there.
Totally agree. And you mentioned very early in our conversation the word empathy. And there are a variety of different definitions for empathy. One of them that I appreciate a lot is just the pursuit of understanding, or seeking to better understand someone else's perspective. And that comes through active listening. It might not mean I believe the same thing that you believe, but I understand better what you're saying. And I'm so glad that you teach that on the first day of medical school or very, very early in that journey.
Yeah.
I'm a huge fan of it. I don't know if you've ever interacted with or encountered the research that Dr. Helen Reese
Oh,
from
yeah.
Harvard Medical School undertakes, but I've had
Yeah.
Dr. Reese on the show and love her research on clinician empathy and how it can be taught. And I just think there's so much strong alignment between your work and hers.
I think I thought our book was there, but yeah, that book is great, and I think I reference it in that workshop, or I have referenced it in workshops, and yeah, it's very well connected to that.
Yeah, I'll link to it in the show notes. But let's pivot a second. Let's kind of rewind and go like way back to the beginning. You mentioned that you teach improv now, but it's actually the fact that this was an unexpected Christmas gift that arrived to you that kind of unexpectedly changed your trajectory. So tell that story if you would. And maybe when you walked into that first improv class, did you have any idea that it would become part of your life's work?
Yeah, yeah. The so how it started was my wife and I were finishing our residencies and work in New Orleans. Came time to decide where we were going to move. I wanted to move to another big city. We're both from Omaha. I knew eventually we'd be back in Omaha. I wanted to move elsewhere. She did not. I was outvoted. Back to Omaha we go. I had recently torn my ACL, and so my main identity, I would say, is physician, husband, father, adult sports player, for lack of a better term. And so that was my main activity outside of work and family. And so I was kind of mad about coming back to Omaha. Not mad, but it was not my choice at that time. And my main identity outside of work and family was taken away from me. And so I was not in a good headspace. And then that Christmas, she got me level one improv lessons at the theater here in Omaha that I did not know exist. Uh, Prior, I had no theater experience. I was not a theater kid. The I often say that I'm the youngest of six kids, so I crave attention, but never had a formal outlet for it. And it was also not like I was talking about, I want to be a comedian or I want to do stand up or it was totally out of the blue. And so that first class, I can still remember, I'm so nervous, very, very uncertain. I didn't know what to expect. And just kind of went through it and had moments of fun that whereas like that was awesome. I'm definitely coming back. And so it was a weekly thing. And they kind of the business model somewhat related to these classes is you go to the classes and then you have a class show and they're like, tell everyone you know to come to the class show. It's gonna be great. And I was like, no chance. I am not telling anyone. I'm not, especially the people I work with. Like I'm not telling anyone about this. And so that kind of proceeded on the classes. I'm still very nervous at them, but having fun and enjoying it. And so then I'd have breaks, and I would feel like I would forget it from. If there's a week break, I would feel like I'm starting all over. I don't know how to do this. And so there's a particular exercise that you do in class called a 3-line scene, where one person walks out, says a line, other person walks out, says a line, then the first person says a third line. And within those moments, you're supposed to figure out who, what, when, where, why, what's going to happen in the scene, and establishing that very quickly, very early. And so I kind of took that and applied it to my patients' interactions. And so in doing that, I realized how many assumptions I'd made about what the patient understands or what's important to the patient. And I turned it more into actually communicate. We'll say I actually communicated rather than talking at patients. Um, and then during that time, my patient satisfaction scores improved more than anyone in my group, and they announced it. And I was like, "Look at me! Like, have fun. Improv is helping me." Uh, but again also remember walking out of that meeting and thinking like, I thought I was really good at these skills at baseline, and so why did they have so much room to improve was kind of a shock to me. And so that it kind of told me that there's something there about these skills that I was practicing. And then I just started kind of doing some of the exercises with med students and residents. They're kind of a captive audience. And so they would participate and they would get positive reviews, or they speak of them fondly. And then I kind of had the idea of it, and I told uh, the guy whose office is next to me that we should do this, or that I think this would be a good way to teach a lot of these skills to med students. He's like, I don't know if that's a good idea. Like, has it ever been done before? Is there research on it? Like, is anyone else doing it? And like, let me get back to you on that. And then I think the next week or within the month, the Annals of Internal Medicine had an article published by Belinda Fu and Katie Watson talking about improv for medical students. I was like, oh, we did it. And so there have been all sorts of things like that where like I just kind of put a feeler out and someone says no, but then something else happens that um, helps kind of push it along. And so it was not it was definitely not a like I'm taking this for my career, and it was definitely not I'm doing this to gain a particular skill. It was just kind of started at random and then truly snowballed. But I essentially yes and all the way into what it is now, which is it affects the way I see every event in my life, more or less. So truly by accident.
I love that. And it sounds like, I mean, initially, this was something that you were just going to hide. You weren't going to talk about it when you went to the hospital. It was something that you were just interested in on the side. And it sounds like it took a while, both to convince yourself that it was creating an impact for you, but also then how fantastic to be able to have research support your hypothesis and your kind of inkling that this is something that you wanted to pursue. But I know one thing that you've shared with me also over time that's a finding from your work is that improv can be a great way to equip individuals that don't have formal leadership authority with actual leadership skills. Can you tell me just a little bit about that for the edification of the listener?
Yeah, for sure. So that was also part of my um, uh, believing in these skills is I would be put in positions where I would practice these skills of improv where I'm deeply listening, where I'm really trying to understand the situation, and adding my contribution, not overrunning the situation, but contributing my situation kind of back and forth. Uh, there a handful of kind of high stress situations where I would do that, where I would really try to recognize the reality of the person who's in distress. And then even though I didn't have a leadership title within that position, people were looking to me to help solve the problem. And they're putting me in the leadership situation because I was practicing these skills. And that is definitely something that I've noticed that all of the skills that I talk about in my improv workshops, if you read leadership um, content, it's like you need to do these exact same things and why. And like, well, this is exactly what I practice when I'm practicing improv. Like the skills of that I need in my Wednesday night improv class are the exact same skills that I need as this patient is yelling at me or as my colleague is frustrated with some aspects of our work. And all those things are guaranteed to come up. It's am I have I practiced these skills in that moment, not like am I this person that can solve it, is how do I apply these skills in this moment in real time when it's stressful, when there's some amount of vulnerability um, on both parts. And so that's exactly when I step into the vulnerability of being on stage in front of people. That's a stressful situation that has very low stakes. Um, in stressful situations that have higher stakes, I'm able to practice those skills in that moment because I've had fun practicing them.
Well, I think that that's so important because when you mention, yeah, the themes that are consistent in any HBR article or any book, etc., I'm hearing the words vulnerability come out of your mouth. It takes courage to think about what someone stepping into one of your workshops or any of us in a difficult conversation with a colleague or a patient, etc. We want trust in our teams, but trust doesn't just magically appear. It's built painstakingly slowly. And one of my favorite themes on this podcast is that leadership growth almost always feels uncomfortable before it feels natural. And so, what's one uncomfortable practice that you wish every leader would intentionally put themselves through that you've learned or that you teach?
Yeah, I would say it's just the act of doing something uncomfortable. I feel like the improv is there are certain aspects of improv that I'm good at, but the practice of it requires me being able to produce all of them. Like on an improv stage, someone may ask me to sing. I hate singing. I'm bad at singing. There's no redeeming quality for anyone to hear me sing except the discomfort that it's providing me. But if I'm on stage, someone says, sing that song that you always used to sing, I kind of have to do that in that moment. And everyone knows that that's a part of it. And so forcing through that, because that's what the situation demands, I think improv has provided that. And I think leaders would benefit from that sense of do what the situation demands, not just what I'm the best at.
Love that. And it underpins or validates so many things that I believe, and what any of us, we probably all, of course, would wish that things were easier, life was more comfortable, it wasn't difficult, but everything that we want in every domain of life. Excellence requires, sitting in a moment of tension to be physically or nutritionally, where we want to be financially, professionally, right? Relationally, all these things. We don't necessarily always want to do the things that we know we need to do, but embracing that discomfort in pursuit of what is on the other side of it is an important discipline. But our time is running short, and I have a couple of kind of rapid fire questions I'd love to wrap up with. Are you game?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay. So, biggest communication mistake that physicians make?
I would say assuming too much that
Mm.
the people that they're communicating with share understanding, worldview, etc. That was for me. That I came to realize that too many assumptions and need to clarify each time I communicate.
Curse of knowledge. Physicians are some of the most highly educated, well-known, well-knowing individuals, but there's always something more, isn't there? All right, second question. What one improv principle everyone could practice tomorrow?
Yes, and forces you into a position of empathy, and if you do it effectively, you'll receive an immediate benefit to it. You may not. It's not always as rewarding as the improv stage, but I promise you it will be rewarding and improve the state of your conversations immediately.
Leadership lesson you learned the hard way.
The assumptions thing, both with colleagues, less so with patients, but I would say with colleagues, I think that leads to a lack of trying to understand that promotes disconnection. And I would say the assumptions that people see the problem the same way that I do, or that I have the sole answer to the problem.
What's something you're still practicing yourself, Mike?
I would say the listening and the empathy, like those are the most immediate benefit. I would say it brings in awareness of when I listened well and when I was effectively empathetic. Um, but I still find areas where I need to really improve, or like I did not do that very well. I can improve there. And so those are the highest yield and immediate benefit from improv, and yet also the areas where I'm fine tuning constantly and wish I was better.
Last question. Complete the sentence. Great leadership is.
Exactly as you said, helping others push themselves through discomfort to feel the benefit at the other end, which in turn creates more leaders.
Love it. Mike, thank you so much for this conversation. Thank you for your important work. I'm going to include links in the show notes to where people can find you, your website. I can't highly enough recommend Mike's work, and you work with a whole host of types of healthcare organizations all over the nation. And I'm just hopeful that people will follow your work and perhaps reach out and collaborate with you. I'm grateful to know you.
Thanks so much, Laurie. Yeah, this is great. I enjoy having these conversations, and your perspective on it, again, helps me understand the things that I'm doing. And so thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Growth Edge Leadership Podcast. Until next time, stay curious, keep growing. I'm rooting for you.